Good morning, Vietnam!
Good morning, Vietnam, made famous by the late Robin Williams in the 1987 film with the same name, can still be heard today as Vietnamese people go about their business. Llewellyn King, reporting on Vietnam, wrote, "Watching the traffic is like seeing a column of ants going to and fro in a courteously chaotic way. The only absolute rule on the roads is to keep to the right. Everything else is improvisation." At the heart of this traffic miracle, moving millions of people with little delay, is the humble but iconic Vespa scooter. If you think Eskom or Telkom have problems, have a look at this lot. But at least this seems to work. Even dogs know how to cross the road. For the most part, Hanoi has no traffic lights, except on major thoroughfares, and no stop or yield signs, and certainly no traffic cops that one can see. There are more than 3 million scooters in Hanoi alone, most of which take to the streets daily. They weave, they dodge, brake, swerve, swoop, accelerate in what, to European eyes, is absolute chaos, and no one seems to get road rage. Anywhere else, there would be fistfights at every intersection. If you want to cross the street, pluck up courage, ask for forgiveness from your creator, and step into the maelstrom of motorised wonder that the throng of riders have extrasensory perception and will part like the Red Sea for you. I would have loved to have stayed longer to explore this amazing hubbub of life, but we have to move on. Next stop, Ha Long Bay. We left Hanoi for the 5-hour, 165-kilometre coast trip to Ha Long Bay. Our cruise ship was a luxurious Orco, where we were welcomed on board with drum beats and flag wave. Ha Long Bay is in complete contrast to Hanoi. This quiet, remote area is in the Gulf of Tonkin and includes some 1,600 islands and islets, forming a spectacular seascape of limestone pillars. Because of their precipitous nature, most of the islands are uninhabited and unaffected by human presence. One needs to be careful if you are an early riser and want to take in the scenery while still in your birthday suit. You could quite easily get a shock to hear, "Hello, want to buy something?" coming from underneath your balcony, and see all these ladies in small boats selling everything from wine to biscuits. I really needed something to cover up my embarrassment. These ladies live with their families in houses built on the water and eke out a living ferrying tourists around the islands. Although a World Heritage Site, pressures associated with growing tourism continue to be an issue for government. Authorities and an appropriate balance between conservation and development, while difficult to maintain, is important to ensure the protection of the natural values of the area. Although very peaceful, 2 days was enough for me. No Wi-Fi connection. We were soon on our way again back to Hanoi Airport and our flight to Siem Reap, Cambodia. Our hotels have all been first class, and this was no exception, with spacious rooms and balconies overlooking the pool area. Just the thing to relax in after a tiring coach and flight journey. This would be our base for the next 2 nights while we explore the ancient temples of Angkor. In 1860, missionaries came across ruins in the Cambodian jungle and discovered a lost city twice as large as Manhattan. We visited just 3 of the most important temples, Angkor Thom, Angkor Wat and Ta Prohm. Our first stop was to Angkor Thom, Great City, a 13th century temple built in a 3-kilometre walled and moated area. It was the last royal city and capital of the Angkorian Empire. In the evening, we were entertained to an ancient Apsara dance performance. The next day, we were awakened at 4:30 a.m. for the hour's drive to Angkor Wat to view the sun rising from behind the temple. If you ever believed you were going to be the only people there at that time in the morning, you are sadly mistaken. Thousands of tourists had already taken up the best positions in front of the lake to capture the sunrise. The northern reflecting pool in front of Angkor Wat is the most popular and crowded sunrise location. The sun rises behind Angkor Wat, providing a silhouette of the temple's distinctively shaped towers against a coloured sky. Angkor Wat is a massive 3-tiered pyramid, crowned by 5 lotus-like towers rising 65 metres from ground level, and is the centrepiece of any visit to the temples of Angkor. If you've got the energy, climb up to the 3rd floor for the view. They say it's magnificent. It felt like we had been up all night, and now we were to visit a 3rd temple, Ta Prohm. I was going to give it a miss, as I was up to here with looking at piles of stones and receiving a cultural ear-bashing by the well-meaning guide. But I was informed it couldn't make the best pictures, so I tagged along with the rest of the weary group. This sprawling monastic complex is only partially cleared of jungle overgrowth. Intentionally left partially unrestored, massive fig and silk cotton trees grow from the towers and corridors, giving an appearance of giant tentacles smothering the ruins and about to crush the already delicate stonework. Ta Prohm was originally constructed as a Buddhist monastery and was enormously wealthy in its time, boasting control of over 3,000 villages, thousands of support staff and vast stores of jewels and gold. We hadn't finished yet. We were then taken to an orphanage to see the children dance and view their paintings, which of course we were encouraged to buy. ODA, Opportunities of Development Through Art, was established in 2003 by Leng and his wife Sri Yon. Leng himself was orphaned when he was a young boy, after having witnessed his father being killed under the rule of the Khmer Rouge. His aunt and uncle found him and took him in. The legacy of their kindness to him and the realisation that his life would have taken a dramatically different path but for them, entrenched in Leng a heartfelt desire to help as many children as he could. Leng went on to gain a fine arts degree. He now uses his knowledge and talent to teach the children to paint. Under Leng's guidance, the older children now teach the younger ones. Leng and Sri Yon seek out enough finances from sales of the children's artwork to provide everything for the children. Rather than growing up believing that they must rely on donations and charity, the children at ODA learn that they have the ability to work for what they want and need. They are so proud when one of their paintings sells. As you see, I bought one of the paintings. They are exceptionally well done and would not look out of place in any room of the house. After a good night's rest, we were on our way to the Mekong, a 7-hour coach trip. The authorities, in their wisdom, had decided to dig up the whole road instead of doing small sections and repairing them, then moving on to the next part. This resulted in huge dust storms and restricted one's visibility.
Everyone in the whole world are suggested to eat these insects to maintain, like I said, balance the animals on Earth. Get tired. Used to be very low in the house, but now it's new.
We stopped halfway for a very welcomed happy break, as they call it, at a local market selling fried bugs. The Vietnamese and Cambodians eat anything on 4 legs except a table and chairs, and anything that flies except a plane. Our guide bought a few for a snack and invited us to try them. Fried tarantula, fried locusts, fried beetles and crickets. Yummy, he said. We arrived at our destination, Protea, in the Tonle Sap Lake, and boarded our boat, La Marguerite, where we were welcomed aboard. As soon as we were settled in our cabins, we set sail for our next stop, Kampong Shanang. For most of the year, the lake is fairly small, around about 1 metre deep, and with an area of 2,700 square kilometres. During the rainy season, when water is pushed up from the Mekong into the lake, it increases its area to approximately 16,000 square kilometres, with a depth of 9 metres. This expansion floods the nearby fields and forests, providing a great breeding ground for fish. Hence the floating fishing villages along the way. The next morning we left our mothership and travelled by a small boat into the wetlands and to the port of Kampong Shanang. The people are mainly involved in fishing and rice cultivation and do a bustling trade along the sea wall.
Then you put in the filter plus the water leaking, other things I tell you honestly.
Street markets also exist, selling everything from food to clothing. One also needs to step back and look at not just what the tourist guide wants us to see, but to take in the local surroundings. The amount of garbage that is ankle deep in places, especially along the shoreline, is difficult to miss, especially as one has to wade through it to get from the craft up to street level. Question the guide on this and he will look at you as much to say, well, where do you expect it to go? This, coupled with the lack of sanitation, most of the people live on boats or houses on stilts straight over the water's edge, doesn't leave much to the imagination to where all the waste goes. It may look very peaceful and serene, but what lurks under the surface doesn't bear thinking about, and the inviting fish course on the evening's menu is definitely a no-no. That evening we were moored off Ko Chen. Note the rubbish again. The next morning we took a leisurely stroll around the local village making silver bracelets and copper pots, and of course were encouraged to buy a few trinkets. It was soon time again to say our farewell to these very friendly people and board the ship for our next destination, the capital of Cambodia, Phnom Penh. In Cambodia, a genocide was carried out by the Khmer Rouge regime led by Pol Pot between 1975 and 1979, in which 1.5 to 3 million people were killed. They had planned to create a form of agrarian socialism. Policies of forced relocation of the population from urban centres, torture, mass execution, use of forced labour and malnutrition led to the deaths of an estimated 25% of the total population, around 2 million people. The genocide was ended following the Vietnamese invasion of Cambodia. Up to 20,000 mass graves, known as the killing fields, have been uncovered. Throughout Cambodia, deadly purges were conducted to eliminate remnants of the old society. The educated, the wealthy, Buddhist monks, police, doctors, lawyers, teachers, and former government officials. Ex-soldiers were killed along with their wives and children. After the Khmer Rouge victory in April 1975, the prison system was extended nationwide, and in Phnom Penh the infamous Tuol Sleng prison was founded. Khan Kek Loon, known as Khmer Rouge, was in charge of the prison, who led the torture and interrogation of prisoners. It is estimated that 16,000 people, men, women and children, were killed within the Tuol Sleng compound, with only 7 known survivors. In April 1998, 73-year-old Pol Pot died of an apparent heart attack following his arrest before he could be brought to a trial by an international tribunal for the events of 1975 to 1979. We were back on board and thankfully had that evening and the whole of the next day to reflect on the horrific photos and scenes from the killing fields. It was interesting to learn while on the bridge that the channel was only 7 metres deep and nearer the mouth of the Mekong only 2 metres deep. At the border crossing, formalities and passports were checked before being allowed into Vietnam and to moor overnight at Tan Chau. The next day we visited a small village along one of the many tributaries where stilt houses leaned precariously against each other. It's difficult to imagine that the water level during the rainy season raises that high and floods the whole area. Children eagerly wait for handouts. They don't beg as in other countries, but stand patiently to be given anything from pens to sweets. They must obviously like spicy food, as these 2 elderly workers sort out the peppers in the sun. Some of the older generation, of course, just sit in the shade wondering what all the fuss is about. We said our goodbyes to these lovely children and made our way downstream to a rattan factory. The noise was unbearable and working conditions even worse, and can only be described as slave labour. Just look at the resigned hopelessness on this woman's face. We now had a very uncomfortable 10-minute ride on a rickshaw to a silk factory. After being shown some fine silk, we were escorted to the factory, where the noise was more deafening than the last place. Rows and rows of machines clattering away in a dimly lit room, the narrow pathway down the middle was an invitation for disaster to happen. We had to be careful that any loose clothing didn't get entangled in the machine. No health and safety rules here. It was time to leave and get back to the sanctity of the ship. Next stop, Cu Chi Tunnels. Communist forces began digging a network of tunnels under the jungle terrain of South Vietnam in the late 1940s during their War of Independence from French colonial authorities. Tunnels were often dug by hand, only a short distance at a time. As the United States increasingly escalated its military presence in Vietnam, the Viet Cong gradually expanded the tunnels. At its peak, the network of tunnels in the Cu Chi district linked VC's support base over a distance of some 250 kilometres, from the outskirts of Saigon all the way to the Cambodian border. The remains of a US M41 tank destroyed by the Viet Cong during heavy fighting in the area. Booby traps were also cunningly camouflaged. Pits with deadly bamboo spikes awaited the unsuspecting who fell into them. Our last night in Saigon. Tomorrow we go home. Our coach taking us to the airport. Scooters, more scooters, and the last of scooters. It's good to be back in the UK, or is it? It's bloody cold.